Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Greater Phoenix Church of God. And those of you on the telesermon tuning in from our conference call, I'm coming to you live from Phoenix. Well, it's actually, is it Phoenix? Scottsdale. Pretty soon, Scottsdale is going to be so big, Phoenix will be a suburb of Scottsdale. That's what's going to happen, I think. It just keeps on going. Well, greetings and good to see all of you again. I took my coat off because it's warm in here, and I got a wool coat, and it's just going to make me sweat. And I always sweat when I preach anyhow, so that's it. Well, we've had quite a couple of years. I just look at brethren all over the place that we lost. It's just disheartening in many ways, but they have stayed faithful. These people we lost have been in the churches and for 30, 40, 50 years and have attended feasts and kept the Sabbath and did this for many, many years. I'm very proud of them. And they've gone, like my wife Molly has finished the course. She's done. And I used to fear death a lot when I was younger, and you know what you do always. All of you young people, you fear it because you got a lot of life to live. You don't want death to come. But now, after having buried her, I'm thinking, well, I've seen it. I've seen it up close. So if it happens to me, it happens to me. That's the way it is, and I know where I'm going to be buried now. I'm going to be buried right in a companion grave with her. So that's just the way it's going to be. Some other people who lost, they lost. Jim Cookman here lost his precious wife, Betty. Jeannie Howell recently lost her husband, Jack. We had a call from Missouri from a lady by the name of Peggy McDonald. She was married to Robert McDonald III. He taught at Ambassador for a while. He taught geology and sciences, very interested in earth movements and all that. So he was 89, and he died a couple of weeks ago. Elizabeth Landing lost her son, Carl, which was unexpected. Nobody knew, nobody understood, and he just was found dead. So it's a tough road. A lot of you have had. How many people here have lost a brother or a sister or a husband or a wife? You lost it, okay? You lost it, okay? So we all know the thing of loss. And it seems to be that God has set something in motion. With every loss, there's something greater coming. You lose your baby teeth and you get your permanent teeth. You lose your childhood and you become an adult. You lose your way of being a child, and next thing you know, you have much more pleasure as an adult than you did as a child. So things happen to us. It's just the way it is. I have other people I think of mentioning, but I can't, all of a sudden they don't come to mind that have lost people and need your prayers. Well, I know Donna Tatum lost her husband. And others, some of them lost years ago, and you just go on. Somebody asked me, well, what do you do? I said, well, unless I died, the next day is coming. I wake up, there's another day, and I got to get breakfast, and I got to do this, and you got to do that, and you get around, and it's just the way it is. Some of you might not know that the third leading cause of death after heart disease and cancer are medical mistakes, hospital mistakes, doctor mistakes, interactions with drugs. That is the third leading cause of death. Over 250,000 Americans die every year from our medical profession trying to save us. So you have to be very careful in what you take. Somebody asked me, one of my clients just asked me, well, what do I do? My doctor prescribed this. I said, well, here's what I do. I go to the Google and Google it up and look at that drug and what are the benefits, what are the side effects, and I decide whether that's worth it for me. You see some of these advertisements, and the side effect may be death. That's one of the side effects. It could ruin your kidneys, which could lead to death. Well, that's fine. So I can get rid of a skin rash, so I can do something else, and I'm going to take a chance on dying? I mean, it's just ridiculous. You might not have heard, take a little extra time. What time am I supposed to stop? Close to 12, close to noon?
When you're done.
When I'm done? Okay, well, I don't usually talk this long, but I can talk this long, but I don't usually do it. But you probably didn't hear some of you don't listen, I give health tips usually on my streaming, but I talk about SAD, S-A-D. People eat a SAD diet. That's the Standard American Diet, abbreviated SAD, okay? And if you eat SAD, you will become sad. You'll have the standard American diseases. You eat the standard American diet leads to the standard American diseases. Now, what do I mean by the standard American diet? It's all over the place. Did you realize that 90%, over 90% of all food advertisements on television are about foods that are junk and no good for you? Highly advertised. So they don't advertise carrots much because, nobody makes a lot of money on carrots or apples or something like that. But 90% of foods advertised are not good for you, they're junk. And they push it because there's high profitability, a lot of profit in that. And the food industry reaps that profit. And then the drug industry comes along, so you got the standard American disease, now we're going to give you the standard American cure. Take this drug, and take that drug, and take this drug, and take that drug. And now don't you feel better? Well, I got this side effect. Well, now you're going to have this drug for that side effect. Well, then that drug caused a side effect. Well, then take this drug to stop that side effect. But that caused a side effect. So the average person starts off with a couple of drugs, and next thing you know, they're on 6, 7, 8 drugs, many of them to stop the side effect from the original drugs. We don't know. Now, I'm not against the medical profession per se. I'm not. I mean, I had hernia operation. I needed good surgery, and I needed that, and I'm appreciative of it. And when you need something for, to save your life, you want it, or to make you feel more comfortable, you want it. But truthfully, we are the most over-drugged society. Do you know that the United States, if you look up, where does the United States stand in longevity? Of all the countries that are prosperous, have a great GDP, gross domestic product, we are way down the list. Fact is, I think we're number 10 in the top 10 countries. Our longevity has gone down continuously. Yet we spend more money than almost any of them. Japan, who spends the least money, has the second largest, highest longevity. Well, I think I can't remember, they're first longest. And then Sweden also. And some of these other countries that don't spend the amount of money on drugs that our people do live longer. The average American lifespan has dropped. And it's not just because of COVID, it was dropping before that. It's dropped. And when it rose, all these nations, because of cleanliness, because of pure water, because of, safety factors. Cars, you'd be surprised how the amount of deaths in cars have been reduced because of all the safety factors in cars now. But again, our longevity has not increased as fast as many other countries. So you just be careful. The standard American diet is going to lead you to the standard American diseases, and you don't want that. The Apostle Paul wrote a number of letters. They became part of the Bible, what we call the New Testament. People loved them. They passed them from one to another. They copied them over and over and sent letters around and read it. And this is written by Apostle Paul. They would write it. What church do you think Paul wrote more words to than any of the churches? What city was this church in that Paul wrote more than any other churches? Anybody? Corinth. That's right. Corinth. We have 2 major letters, and now scholars have found fragments of at least 7 other letters that Paul wrote to the Corinthians. And he addressed so many issues that probably the study of 1 Corinthians is probably the most rewarding study that any of us can take, because it deals with so many issues, people competing with one another. I'm of Paul, I'm of Peter, I'm of James, and so on. They were all competing with who they were, who they belonged to. I belong to Paul, I belong to Peter, I belong to this one. And they were just, and Paul says, is Christ divided? Is that what he is? Christ is not divided. And so he gets after them for that. I would like to address you as full adults, but I can't. Then you're suing one another. You're going to court against each other. You can't even put up with a little bit of being wronged at all. And don't you have anybody in the church that can decide on some of these issues? And don't you have leaders that can decide whether this or that is the right thing? And then he talks about the issue of marriage. He talks about the issue of tongues. He talks about the issue of women, in the church. And, what about the hair? What about this? What about that? He talks about the fact that some of them stopped believing in the resurrection. They said the resurrection already took place. He talks about eating meat offered to idols. He's correcting a whole bunch of things in the Corinthian church. Now, the city of Corinth itself is kind of an interesting history. The city of Corinth is located in a way down in this part of Greece. And the city of Corinth was strategically located because it's got north and south avenues for trade, and it's also got east and west avenues for trade. You'll see, if you look at Corinth, then you'll see the Achaeans. Achaia was a part, and Paul talks about Achaia in his thing. They were another group of people, but they were part of that area of surrounding Corinth, okay? Corinth was distinct. This is what Strabo, one of the historians, said. Corinth is called wealthy because of its commerce, since it is situated on the isthmus and a master of 2 harbors. Situated on the isthmus, it reached out. You have to see a map in your Bible, you'll see Corinth. And it certainly was a classic place. Now, what happened with Corinth, in about 44 AD, Julius Caesar reestablished it. But prior to that, Corinth got in a squabble with one of Rome's favorite areas. And the Roman army invaded Corinth and that area, and they devastated the Achaeans and ransacked and ruined the city. It was so bad that Cicero said, when around 79 BC, he said, the sudden sight of the ruins of Corinth had more effect on me than it probably did on the actual inhabitants. Because when he walked in there, this place was devastated. Corinth was completely devastated. Well, Julius Caesar, around 44 BC, decided, I'm going to resurrect that city because it has so many advantages. It needs to be prosperous. So Corinth's government then, he brought in people of trade. He brought in what he called the freedmen, That is, they were not slaves of anybody, the freedmen. He brought in his own veterans. He brought in urban traders, persons and laborers. He brought it all into Corinth. And so they started building it up the city. And it became very prosperous. Corinth's government was organized into 3 parts: an assembly of citizens, voters, a city council, and an annual magistrates, people who come in once a year and they ran things in the city. Now, Corinth, these people loved their freedom, okay? It was set up not on the Greek style. Corinth followed the Roman style of the city, okay, so you know. So these people loved their independence, loved their freedom, were bold to use their freedom. And you'll see that in the book of 1 Corinthians, because Paul keeps talking to them about their freedom. I know it's good. He said, I know all things are lawful, but not all things are convenient. Not all things are right. Now, Corinth was strategic importance for the Apostle Paul. Corinth had a large Jewish community. And what did Paul do when he went into a city? He went first to the synagogue. He was recognized because he spoke Hebrew. He also spoke Greek. He was recognized, hey, we have this man here. Come on in and speak. So Paul would address the people. Then they would bring it around that about the Savior. He would show from the Scriptures, about the Savior. So once again, he had an advantage going to Corinth. And he converted a lot of people. So he had a big church there. So Corinth was strategic. It was strategic for Paul to spread the truth of the gospel and about Jesus Christ. As one man wrote, Corinth was a logical place to establish a strong Christian church, for its numerous trade connections would assure the rapid spread of the new religion. So from Corinth, it spread out. Christianity spread. And that early first century, Paul was there. So of all the letters, if you could study one letter, of all the letters to study, I mean, not just read it. There's a difference between reading it and studying it. The one letter to study is 1 Corinthians. The book of 1 Corinthians has so much value to it, so many things, so many principles. I want to deal, of course, I can't deal with the whole book of Romans. You understand? 1 Corinthians, I can't deal with it. It's got 16 chapters. I want to deal with one chapter, only one. And it's the chapter that is called, some people call it the love chapter. It's 1 Corinthians 13. Now, many scholars will say, how could Paul have written this like this? It flows so beautifully. It's like a poem. It's like it just flows in its own way. It's just like such a treatise. How could he have just penned this? Yet we know Paul penned it. And we also know that there is no scholar who is a Greek, Hebrew, or first century scholar who doubts that Paul wrote 1 Corinthians. Every scholar worth anything says Paul wrote 1 Corinthians, one of Paul's genuine letters. They might question 1 Timothy, but they won't question 1 Corinthians. He must have thought about that a lot before he dictated it or penned it. So let's read. First, I want to give you a summary. You start in 1 Corinthians chapter 12 is talking about these spiritual gifts. Everybody has to use their spiritual gifts. You have a spiritual gift. You have to find out what it is, and you use it to the benefit of the church. You bring your spiritual gifts together to enhance the church. And so he's talking about, but they all wanted different spiritual gifts. You see, some of them wanted this one, some of them wanted that one, some of them wanted this one. I want the gift of wisdom. I want the gift of knowledge. Knowledge was a big thing, in Corinth. I want to know everything. I want to know gnosis. I want the word that in the Greek is gnosis. I want to know things, And so in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, he comes down and he says, in verse 29, all are not apostles. And the apostles was a gift to the church. The apostles were gifts to the church. Are they? All are not prophets, are they? All are not teachers, are they? All are not workers of miracles, are they? These are all various gifts. Not everybody has the same gift. All do not have gifts of healings, do they? I'm reading from the New American Standard Version. Verse 30, all do not speak with tongues, do they? See, all these are gifts, you see. All these do not interpret, do they? But earnestly desire the greatest gifts. Now, you could say that Paul is making a sarcastic statement here. And he's going like, they all do this, but let me read this in a different Greek translation. Continue to be zealously concerned about the greatest gifts. You need to, everybody wants this. Become zealously concerned that you're going to get the greatest of God's spiritual gifts. Yes, and then he says, yes, an even greater way I'm still going to show you. Notice verse 31. But zealously, earnestly desire the greater gifts, and I show you a still more excellent way. I'm going to show you something better. You're going to want all the best gifts, but let me show you a different way. And then we start 1 Corinthians. I'm going to read this in a more accurate translation using historical stuff. So here it is. I have the New American Standard, which says, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but I have not love. Here's the way this is translated. If I were to speak with human or angelic tongues, but if I had not love, agape is the Greek word, a special love, the way God gives it, a special love that goes out from you to others. If I have not love, I would have become only a resonating jar. Now, in that time, certain musical things were done with these jars that were filled a certain way with liquid, and they would resonate, and they would make a no. You've seen people do that with glass things, and they put so much water in it, and it has a certain tone. They have these. I would only become a resonating jar or a reverberating cymbal. How cymbals go, they clash, and then you hear that, and it vibrates for a little bit, That's all I'll be. I'll be just a resonating, even if I could speak with human or angelic tongues, but I didn't have agape, love, I'm just going to be a resonating jar or a vibrating cymbal, reverberating cymbal. And verse 2, and if I should have the gift of prophecy. Now, they all wanted the gift of prophecy. And by the way, that does not necessarily mean predicting the future. When the book of 1 Corinthians is written here, the word prophecy is not meaning, that's not the original and the most important meaning. The gift of prophecy means speaking forth the word of God plainly and powerfully. Okay, that's what it meant. It didn't mean the idea of I predict, I'll tell you what's going to happen in Russia. Russia's going to invade Ukraine, and then there's going to be this, and then that'll start World War III, and then the Gog and Magog will come. That's not what that word means. It means powerfully speaking forth the word of God, the gift of speaking forth-telling, not foretelling, but forth-telling. And if I should have the gift of prophecy, and if I penetrate all the depths too profound for mere human discovery, okay? If I have the gift of prophecy, I'm going to read from the New American Standard Version. and know all mysteries, all knowledge, and have all knowledge. See, if I have to penetrate the depths too profound for mere human discovery, and I have all knowledge. Did they love knowledge in Corinth? Yes, they loved knowledge. And what did Paul tell them? Yeah, well, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. Remember that? It's in 1 Corinthians 8. Knowledge puffs up. And if I possess the gifts of every kind of faith, okay? It's not just, and if I have faith so as to move mountains, but it's every kind of faith. There are various kinds of faith that you can have. If I had the gift of every kind of faith, okay? Even sufficient to remove mountains. Now, don't take that literally, because there's no place in the Bible, not Jesus, not any of the apostles, nobody that we know ever moved a mountain out from the land and into the sea. It was a typical proverb. It was a proverb that said, you will do something so spectacular and so hard, almost nobody can do it. That's all that meant. Because there's not one, if you find somebody in the Bible that moved a mountain somewhere, let me know, because I never found it. Jesus said, if you had faith as a grain of mustard seed, you would say to this mountain, be cast in the sea, and it would do it. But he never did it. No apostle did it. Nobody did it that I know. It would have been big news back there to cast one of these mountains into the sea, and you will not do it. It's just an expression of something. You're going to be able to do something so difficult with your faith. It's like moving a mountain. So I want all knowledge, okay? And if I discover all human discovery and had all knowledge. Now, knowledge was big. It was a big watchword. You'll see it used in 1 Corinthians in chapter 1, verse 5, and chapter 8, verse 1, and verse 7 of chapter 8, and on verse 10 of chapter 8, and verse 11 of chapter 8, and chapter 12, verse 8, and chapter 13, verse 8, chapter 14, verse 6, okay? Human knowledge. They wanted all. They loved knowledge. I want to know things. I want to know way above everybody else. I want to know. You know, there's a certain vanity in knowing, isn't there? I know. Be the first on your block to have this. Be the first on your block to get this, to know this. Buy this thing, and you'll have knowledge that other people don't know. We all love that. It appeals to our vanity. So what Paul is doing here, but. He says, and if I possess every gift of faith that I might remove mountains, but after all that, I lack love. I might lack love, agape. I am nothing. Now, they thought they would be something. Well, all of us think I'd be something. If I had all knowledge, well, you'd say, man, he's something. But if I don't have any love, Paul says, you're nothing. All these gifts that you want, all these fantastic gifts, he enumerates them here, and you're nothing. Even if I should divide up all my possessions to feed the needy, and if I hand over my body that I may glory. Now, we have a statement here that I may glory. This happens because there are two similar Greek words. Do any of you realize, you know how the Bible got copied? For the most part, most of the manuscripts of the Bible got copied by having all of you, you're all Greek, you know, let's say I was talking in English, and I'm going to read this passage. All of you write it down, exactly what I read, and then we'll have more copies of 1 Corinthians, okay? So I'm saying words, and your mind lapses. You hear a word, and it sounds like another word, and you put the other word in, and you think that's the one that I said, but it's not. And, you know, you remember the old The old trick the teachers used to do, she'd give a phrase, she'd write a phrase and say, you read this phrase to this person, and then you repeat that phrase to that person, and you repeat it to that person, and it goes around the room. And when it comes back to the last person in the room, they said, now, write the phrase down that you last heard. And it changes so much from the original thing. So people can make mistakes. Now, these are dedicated scribes, dedicated. Yet, sometimes words get changed. Words get changed. So here's two words. I'm going to read them to you in the Greek, okay? It's called kauthesomai. Kauthesomai means to be burned, okay? Here's another Greek word, kaukesomai. That means the glory, to brag about it, the glory. So which one of these words did the Apostle Paul really write? Did he write kaukesomai or kauthesomai? Did he say, I will be burned, I'll give my body to be burned? Well, the best scholars now are saying, no, he's saying that I might glory. And what did the Corinthians love more? The glory in themselves. They wanted the glory in their knowledge and the glory in their tongues. They wanted the glory in their women having their hair different ways. And they had all this thing to brag about it. They wanted to glory in it and brag about it. So a better translation, I think, but you determine what you want. I don't know what the point of being burned is, but here it is. That even if I should, this is verse 3 now, verse 3. Even if I should divide up my possessions to feed the needy and hand over my body that I might glory, or you say to be burned, but I have not love, it counts for nothing. Now, to be burned would be what? To be sacrificed? To be what? To hand over my body to be burned? When would you do that? Hand over your body to be burned? Particularly, no. Paul would not stand by and say, here, burn my body. You know, he resisted any kind of a person to hurt him or slap him. He tried to get away from them. Jesus did too. Do I hand over my body to be burned? For what? On what occasion? So here it makes more sense to say, and if I hand over my body so that I might glory. Here I'm going to give up my body. I'm giving up my possessions. I'm going to give up my body so I can brag about it. I even gave, my body for them if they wanted it, so that I might glory. But if I have not love, it counts for nothing. So this is how the New American Standard reads it. They read to be burned. They get that from the same manuscript that King James does. But better, I think it's a better translation. But again, you have to make that decision. Look up several translations to see what they say. Now, so the first three verses are showing the futility of all these gifts. I'm going to show you a better way. You want all these gifts. There are no better gifts than this, right? Faith that can move mountains, knowledge that's tremendous, prophecy. You can speak forth and with powerful ways. You can have every gift of faith, every tongue, speak in every way. You can penetrate the depths of knowledge. You have all these wonderful gifts, but if you don't have love, if you don't have agape, you don't have God's love, you're nothing. Totally futile. All these gifts are useless. You're just a gong. You're just a reverberating cymbal and these jars that are making noise. Okay? Now, in the beginning in verse 4, it says, love is patient. But scholars who look at these words are saying it's not that love is patient. Love is an active force, and they put an active verb. This is what this means. So here's the translation of verse 4. Love waits patiently. Love does something. It's not just patient, it waits patiently. Okay, verse 4. In other words, to remain, what does that mean? To remain tranquil while waiting. You're not screaming, you're not bound, yelling at people. You have patience while you wait. Abraham, the Bible says, thus, having patiently waited, in Hebrews chapter 6 and verse 15, talks about Abraham, having thus patiently waited, he obtained the promise. So it means to bear up under provocation without complaint, to be patient. Love waits patiently. Okay? Now notice the next word. So you have in verse 4 what? Love is patient. Love is kind. Love shows kindness. These are active verbs. Love shows. You want to do something. You want to show kindness. Love does not burn with envy. Burn with envy. Does not brag. Now, here are some things it doesn't do. So we know what it does do. It waits patiently. We know what it shows kindness. But what it does not do, love does not burn with envy. Now, envy is not the same as jealousy. Sometimes I'm jealous of my neighbor's lawn. Think, well, they put in a very nice fruit tree there in the front, and they made it real. I'm sort of jealous. I wish I had done that. Maybe I could do that. Maybe I think I might do that. But I'm happy that they did it, and it's a good thing that I might be competitive or at least zealous enough to do something like that. Envy is a terrible, different thing. Envy. I don't want you to do it. I don't want to do it, but I don't want you to do it. I don't want to have it. I just don't want you to have it. That's an evil thinking thought. Okay, I don't want it, but I don't want you to have it. That's envy. And envy, love does not burn. And a lot of people, it burns with envy, okay? Love does not burn with envy. Love does not brag or boast. Is not inflated with its own self-importance. I'm so important, I'm so great, I'm so what? That's not love. Love doesn't do that. Love is not inflated with its own self-importance. Romans chapter 12 and verse 3 says, for through the grace given to me, I say to every man among you, and it means men and women, I say to every person among you, not to think more highly of him or herself than he or she ought to think, but to think so as to have sound judgment. King James says, think soberly, as God has allotted to each one the measure of faith. Think with sound judgment. Okay, in verse 5 now. Love, it does not behave with ill-mannered impropriety. Does not behave with ill-mannered impropriety. Is not preoccupied with interests of self. Does not become exasperated into temper. Verse 5. Does not keep a reckoning of evil. These are things love just does not do. We know what love does. It waits patiently. It shows kindness. It does some of that. But love does not, burn with envy. It does not behave in ill-mannered impropriety. And it does not become exasperated with temper. It does not keep a reckoning of evil. Oh, you did this. I remember you did this. I'll never forget it. I'll do that. It was interesting. I was talking to my brother, my youngest brother, who's not in the church anymore, but he, during the time of the uprising, there's just a lot of doctrinal difficulties in the former organization. And I had been forced to resign my position, so I did. I resigned from being the vice president for church administration. And they wanted me to go out, send me on a leave of absence somewhere, so I get away from Pasadena so nobody could contact me. But my brother went up to the son of the leader and said, do you think it's because the leadership doesn't listen to anybody? They're not listening. They won't take anything into consideration? He said, no, absolutely not. And you're a dirty basketball player. Change this. You're a dirty basketball player. It's dirty because my brother wouldn't let you shoot without trying to block it. He was going to go up and stop you, and he was told he was dirty. Now, this guy had to be holding this in his mind. I know something on you, and I'm going to say it. Yeah, no, that's not the reason. You're a dirty basketball player. So there you are. You put you down. Okay, agape love. Okay, agape love. For even Christ, this is an example of agape love in Romans 15 and verse 3. For even Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of those who reproached you fell on me. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 24, let no one seek his own good, but that of his neighbor. And in Philippians chapter 2, verse 4, do not merely look out for your own interests, personal interests, but also that of the interests of others. So you see in verse 5, love does not become exasperated into a peak. They won't pay attention to me. I'm just exasperated into a peak. The P-I-Q-U-E is an English word, but it captures some of this because the Art Gingrich word here, exasperated into irritation, the Art Gingrich says, to cause a state of inward arousal, to urge on, stimulate to the state of anger and resentment. That's what the Greek word meant. The English word pique means a feeling of irritation or resentment resulting from a slight, especially of one's pride. You could put it this way. He left in a fit of pique, P-I-Q-U-E. He left, it's P-I-Q-U-E. He left in a fit of pique. Somebody didn't recognize his prominence. They didn't recognize how important he was. And he just got up and left. Love does not do that. Verse 6, love does not take pleasure in wrongdoing, whether you do it or whether somebody else does it. Glad to see somebody doing the wrong thing. No, love does not. Let me read that in the New Jerusalem Bible. Love does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but finds its joy in the truth. Okay? That's the thing. Love does not take pleasure in wrongdoing, finds its joy in the truth. Verse 7. It never tires of support. It never loses faith. It never exhausts hope. I have no more hope. I'm done. I have no more hope. I'm done with it. Never exhaust. Love does not exhaust hope. There's still hope. Love does not lose faith. It does not tire of support. It's not done with support. Verse 7, it bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. That's how most translations have it. But listen to this translation. It never tires of support, right? Bears all things. It never loses faith, believes all things. It never exhausts hope, it hopes all things, and never gives up. Love never gives up. You don't give up on people. You don't give up on your children. You don't give up on friends. You don't give up. Love never gives up. It's a beautiful statement. Verse 8, love never falls apart. Never fails, says it. It never falls apart. Verse 8. No, it doesn't fall apart. Love never comes to an end, says the New Jerusalem Bible. Never comes to an end. Verse 8. So love never falls apart. Whether it be prophecies, these will be brought to an end. Now, if it is a prophecy of the future, it will be brought to an end. How many sermons have you heard over the years? How many sermons? Thousands. How many sermons have I given? I don't know, 1,000 or 2 probably. Sermons. But they come to an end. The voice stops. The sound is not here anymore. You don't hear my voice anymore. One day it'll all be gone. And the only thing that will be there is love. That's it. That's the only thing that'll be here. Sound of the sermons are going to go. All your notes, whether you took notes or not, you're probably, oh yeah, well, that's a better translation this way or that. Love never falls apart. Whether it be prophecies, these will be brought to an end. If it be tongues, they will stop. If it be knowledge, it will be rendered obsolete. We render knowledge obsolete every time, all the time. But we used to say, do this way, brush your teeth this way. No, that they said, don't brush your teeth that way. Here's how to get out of a bed. No, don't get out of bed like that. Get out of bed like this. You'll save your bed. Here's how to walk. Don't walk like that. Walk like. Here's how to. We change our thing. Knowledge is constantly being superseded. I think Karl Barth tried to capture what Paul said. He said, love is the one form of Christian action which does not require, nor is not subject to, transformation. It doesn't move. In other words, here you have love. Here you have agape love, God's love. It doesn't move into something else. It never moves somewhere else. Knowledge transforms, right? Knowledge is transformable. Love is never transformable. It doesn't move. It doesn't transform into something else. It is pure. It is right. It is there. And it never is anything else but itself. Karl Barth said that. Love is the one form of Christian action that does not require nor is subject to transformation or absorption into another higher or future form. You cannot say this about tongues, they'll be superseded. You cannot say this about knowledge, it will be done. You cannot say this about even faith in many ways. You can get more faith, you can get extra faith, you can get better faith, you can get faith of different kind. But you can't do that with love. So in verse 9, for we know, that is, we learn. We know or learn in fragmentary ways. However much you know, you learned it in fragmentary ways. Do you know algebra? Do you know trigonometry? Do you know what is it? What am I trying to say? There's another math. Anyhow, if you know this, and you go into an airline, did you ever look in the cockpit of an airplane, one of these new super jets, and you look at all these buttons, and you look at all this stuff, and you go, oh man, how smart this guy is to know all that. He learned it in fragmentary ways. He learned that this button means this. Oh, yeah, go over it. You can put that button, that's right. Now I'll go over this one. He learned that one piece by piece. The same way you learn math. You learn first your numbers, and you learn 1 plus 1 is 2, and you learn this, and 1 times 10 is 10, and so on. And you learn all these things in fragmentary ways, okay? For we know, that is, we learn in fragmentary ways. And we prophesy, that is, preach, part by part. I can't give you the whole Bible here. Nobody, Mr. Cookman doesn't give you the whole Bible. Nobody comes in here, gives you the whole thing. You get fragments here, a fragment here, a fragment, a little bit here, a little bit there. That's all you learn. For we know in part, in fragmentary way, and we prophesy, we preach in part. But verse 10, but when the completed whole comes, when we get it all, what is piece by piece will be done away. You don't have to learn piece by piece anymore. When God gives you the whole thing, you won't ever have to learn it piece by piece anymore. And then Paul says, when I was a child, the Greek word here is nephos, okay? Nepios, N-E-P-I-O-S, nepio. When I was a child, it means an infant. A little baby, little infant, one that might be able to sit up on the floor, maybe crawl a little bit. When I was an infant, okay? By the way, nepios was an insult when you call a grown person a nepios. You're saying he's a nepios. That means he doesn't know anything. He's just kind of a dope, So it was used by the Greeks to be an insult. But Paul writes, when I was a nepios, okay? Meaning an infant, meaning somebody simple-minded, immature person. I used to talk like a nepios. I used to form opinions like a child. I used to count values like a child. When I reached adulthood, I turned my back on the things of childhood. What he's saying is, in this life, we're like, in some way, we're learning in fragmentary ways where we don't have all the knowledge. We're learning here. And one day we're going to get the whole, and we're going to say, I turn my back on all those fragmentary. I'm turning my back on that. God has given me the whole thing. The Apostle Paul used that word nepios in 1 Corinthians 3, verse 1. And I, brethren, this is 1 Corinthians 3, and I, brethren, could not speak to you as spiritual men, but as to men of flesh, as to infants, nepios in Christ. You were like little kids crawling on the floor. I couldn't talk to you about major things. You were nepios in Christ. I gave you milk, not drink, milk to drink rather, not solid food, because you were not yet able to receive it. If indeed even now you're able, even now you are not able, rather. Even now you are not able. He's talking to them, you're still not able to hear grown-up things. Verse 12. For we are seeing the present only by means of a mirror indirectly. You think you're seeing it, right? You think you've got it. You think you know exactly what you see. You think, I see it, right? It's all clear. You're seeing it as like a mirror indirectly. But then it will be face to face. For the present, I come to know and learn part by part, but then I shall come to know just as fully as I have been known. So now, these remain: faith, hope, and agape love. These three. Out of all these things, these are the only things that still remain, that don't go away. These are things you don't give up on. So these things remain, but the greatest of these is agape, because it's pure. It never warps into anything else but what it is. And when you have it, it brings meaning to every other gift you may ever have.